Here's something you have a right to know about the Constitution. Is there any part of the Constitution that is itself unconstitutional? Well, Americans cast votes to elected U.S. senators this past week, but that's something they would not have done under the original Constitution. Ironically, Utah Republican Senator-elect Mike Lee, who we'll chat with in just a moment, shares my views on this point. The Constitution created a United States Senate in which each state legislature, not the voters at large, appointed 2 senators. Only in 1913, at the height of the Progressive Era, when the government started telling us how to live, did the 17th Amendment provide for the direct election of senators by voters. Now that may sound like more direct democracy, but it was the death knell of the idea that the federal government is a coming together of independent sovereign states. The 17th Amendment meant that the states no longer had a place at the federal table, along with the popularly elected House of Representatives and the president elected by the Electoral College. The very idea of the Constitution as an agreement among sovereign states has been assaulted. The 17th Amendment is the part of the Constitution that is unconstitutional, and it should be repealed. With me now to talk about this and more, we welcome Senator-elect Mike Lee to Freedom Watch. Senator, congratulations on your victory and welcome here.
Thank you very much.
I must tell you, Senator, and you know I've been a friend of your family for a long time, and I personally rejoice in your election. I don't know of anybody who's run for the Senate in the past 50 years with the personal and political courage to say to the voters, you shouldn't be voting for me. The legislature of the state of Utah should. How did that play out when you said that?
Well, of course, there are people who agree with me in great numbers in Utah. There are other people who don't. But at the end of the day, it is an absolute historical truth that our federal government was put together under this design that said we need one chamber of Congress in which the states will be represented as states. We lost something with the adoption of the 17th Amendment in 1913. No longer have the states had their own representation. No longer are U.S. senators accountable to the states as states anymore, and they haven't been since 1913. And it's no coincidence, of course, that since 1913, there's been an explosion of federal legislation.
And now, as a result of this explosion of federal legislation, which frequently takes power away from the states, or gives the states money to induce them to do things that would never happen as a result, would never happen if senators had been elected by legislatures. State sovereignty diminishes, the differences between the states is reduced, and federal power increases. That was never intended by the people who wrote the Constitution.
That's quite correct. In fact, if there's one thing that all the Founding Fathers agreed upon, if there's one thing that everyone in all the state ratification debates agreed upon, it's that we shouldn't create, and we weren't creating, a general purpose national government. We wanted limited government at the federal level, a government that would be in charge of just a few basic national things like immigration and national defense. Everything else would be left to the states. And as a control on that, the states were to be represented as states in the Senate. Now, look, you know, in practical terms, I don't think that it's likely that in our lifetime there will be the political will necessary to abolish the 17th Amendment. But there are things we can do about it to offset the erosion of state sovereignty that has occurred over the last 97 years.
Well, one of the things we can do is term limits. I think you've proposed that. Again, an oddity of a soon-to-be sitting senator saying, hey guys, we shouldn't be, and gals, we shouldn't be here for more than 12 years. How will that play out when you get to D.C.?
Well, we'll see. Certainly the current Congress isn't terribly receptive to it. I think that voters in all 50 states are going to start demanding that increasingly, and we'll see changes in coming election years that will make that possible. We've adopted a seniority system that provides a perverse incentive for members of Congress to stay there in perpetuity, saying in effect, you know, I know as citizens in a free republic you can vote for anyone you want, but don't you dare vote for anyone but me, because if you do, you'll lose money and power and influence.
Before I let you go, Senator Lee, you just experienced an enormous victory in the primary against the sitting incumbent and in the general election against the well-financed Democratic opponent. Will you leave? You're only 39 years old. Will you leave after 12 years?
I will leave after 12 years if we're able to get a term limits amendment in. I don't believe in self-term limiting because I think it perpetuates the problem. if everyone who agrees with term limits and sees the needs for them, self-term limits before the job is done, before an amendment's in place, then it will only perpetuate and exacerbate the existing problem.
Senator Mike Lee, soon to be Senator Mike Lee, Republican of Utah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
He once said libertarianism is a threat. What does former Arkansas Governor Mike